We left off the last video by populating our collection view with the avatars of our followers. We implemented a cache so we weren't making unnecessary network calls when we had already downloaded the image, and we left off showing that we weren't downloading the next 100 users. So what we're going to talk about in this video, we're going to deal with pagination, and how we're going to accomplish that is we're going to detect when we're at the bottom of the scroll view, because at the end of the day, a collection view is a subclass of a scroll view. And once we detect when we're at the bottom, we're going to bring in the next 100 followers. There's some other little things we need to do, like some checks to make sure they still have more followers, right? Because we don't want to keep, if they have no more followers, we don't want to keep firing off a network call, right? So that's what we're going to implement. That's the big picture. Let's get to it. So over in our follower list VC, scroll to the bottom, and I scroll to the bottom because this is just code organization. Anytime I conform to a new delegate, I like to put that into an extension. Again, you don't have to do it. It's solely for code organization. The reason I bring this up is because we have to conform to, in order to get the scroll view delegate stuff, we can conform to the collection view delegate. More on that in a second. So extension.follower list VC, UI collection view delegate. There we go. So you could just conform to the UI scroll view delegate, and that would work fine. But the collection view delegate will give you the scroll view delegate. And the reason we're using the collection view delegate is because in a future video, we're going to implement the did tap. I'll show you here. Did select collection view.did select item at. We're going to implement that once we actually tap on the follower and go to a new screen. We're going to have to implement that, but that's later. For now, because we have the scroll view stuff here, start typing scroll view. And you can see all the actions in the scroll view delegate. We're going to use view, did, and dragging. And real quick, just to reinforce, basically what a delegate is, it's kind of sitting back, like waiting for an action. Like the example I just gave, the did select cell. Like it's waiting for us to tap a cell and then it acts. Here in the scroll view, it's waiting for us to end dragging, then it acts. That's like delegates in a nutshell. It sits around and waits to be told to do something. So now that we know the user has ended dragging, we have to do a little bit of math to detect when we're at the bottom. And the math involves like the whole content height in the scroll view. So what that is imagine you had 3,000 followers in your scroll view, right? The scroll view would stretch pretty far down, even though on your phone screen, you only see that section of it. But in reality, the scroll view is really big. That's the content height. And then we have to do some math with the actual height of the scroll view, which is essentially the height of the screen. The only way that's different is based on the different phone sizes, like the iPhone 5 versus the iPhone 11 Pro. And then we need to mess with the offset, the Y coordinate of the offset, which is basically how far you scrolled. So we're going to get into a little bit of that math to detect when we're at the bottom of the scroll view. So before we do that math, we're going to put these into variables. Let offset Y, and that's going to equal scroll view dot content offset dot Y, because we want the Y coordinate, right? Because we're going up and down, not left and right. If you were doing like a horizontal scroll view, then you would use the X axis. And then we need to see the content size. So content height, capital H, camel case, height equal scroll view dot content size dot height. And again, this is like the entire scroll view. If there's 3,000 followers, it's going to be pretty tall, like thousands and thousands of points. And then we need to see the height of the scroll view, which again, this is kind of like the height of your screen, to put it simply. Frame dot size dot height. And the reason I'm putting these into variables is because we're going to do a little bit of math with it down here. And then instead of saying, if content offset Y is greater than all this minus all that, like it just makes the math look easier to read if it's just like offset Y is greater than content height minus height, right? It's just easier to read. So that's why I do this. It's not necessary, but your code will be cleaner. And I want to illustrate this so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to bring in some print statements. You don't want to see me type out print statements. And then we're going to run this. And this way you can see like what I'm talking about as I'm scrolling. And actually, it's not going to work. I caught it before I did it, right? So we conformed to the delegate, but we didn't set the delegate to ourselves, to the follower list VC. So up here in configure collection view, we need to do collection view dot delegate equals self. We need to tell our delegate like what to listen to. We're listening to self. So let's run this now that the delegate's actually going to work, and it's going to print off some values as we're scrolling down that you can see, and hopefully it illustrates what I'm talking about here. So let's scroll all the way to the bottom. You can see the printouts going there. So offset Y is 4801. You can see content height, 5,465. And that's just with 100 followers. So you can see the content is really, really, really long, content height. And then height is 812, which again is the height in points of the iPhone. Offset Y is 4801. That's how far we've scrolled down, right? So the math you do is the content height, which is always, as you see, no matter where I'm scrolling, 5465, because that's what holds 100 followers. When it holds 200 followers, probably be double that. Then you subtract the height of the screen, to make sure you're at the bottom. And if your offset Y, which is how far you're scrolling down, is greater than that value, now we've triggered the delegate. And now we haven't triggered our conditional yet, but that's when we're going to fire off get new followers. So let's actually implement that math real quick, and hopefully this will all be cleared up. So let's delete these print statements and do if offset Y is greater than content height minus height. See, now you see why we put these in variables, right? This is a lot easier to read than if you were like spelling all this out. So if that is the case, now we want to call get followers. So now we need to adjust our get followers signature. Remember, we just typed this real quick while we were testing it. So we want to pass in the username, and which is a string. And we want to also pass in a page, which is an int, right? Because that's what we're going to pass in. So down here, again, we'll just hit the old fix it, give us our username. Didn't quite fill all that in, but the username is going to be username, and then the page is going to be, well, what page? We can't hard code this to 2, right? That's what it would be in this case. So we're going to need a page number variable that we can kind of like a counter, basically, right? So this way we can kind of keep count of that and then throw that in. So let's come up to the top here and let's get rid of this bottom. Let's create a page variable. So var page, and that is going to be an int. We can do some type inference here. So page equals 1. And then we need to update our initial get followers that we call right when we come to the screen. I don't know why that's not giving me the page, but whatever. From the username, and then the page is going to be page that we have up here. So now when we first come onto the screen, like we first load up a follower list VC, the page is 1, and that's the, come on, I don't like looking at errors. And that's the page we're passing in right away in view.load. So we're gonna load the first page in view.load. However, we need to load page 2 here, but we wanna load page. So now here we have to increment page. So we're only gonna increment page if, we make this call. So page plus equals 1. So now page is going to be 2 when we hit this. And then we're going to pull in page 2. So we're going to do more in here for a second, but I want to stay on this page thing, right? Because you can imagine as we keep, like say we just went crazy with the swipes and kept hitting the bottom like repeatedly. Well, in our current code, page is just going to keep counting up 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 as we keep doing that. So we don't really have a check right now to we only want all this to fire off if the user actually has more followers, right? What if you went to a user that only had 4 followers and you pulled them in the first time and then you kept doing this, you kept making the network call on pages and just not efficient, right? So like I said, we need some sort of check to make sure, do they have more followers? So let's create a variable for that because we're going to be kind of flipping this flag here. So var has more followers. And again, initially it's going to be true. It's going to be true right away because we're going to flip it to false when we meet a certain condition. So now that we have that, let's go back down here, and we only want this to happen again if the user has more followers. So to do that, we can do guard has more followers, else return. So what we're saying here is if has more followers is true, then we're going to go ahead and continue on. Else, just return, bounce out of the function. We're done. None of this will get called. Okay, but as you see, has more followers is always true because we just set it here and we're never flipping it to false. So we need to flip it to false here in our network call. Now, if you think about it, when would has more followers equal false? Right, we're pulling in 100 at a time. So as long as our last network call got less than 100 followers, right? Say I have 200 something followers. We pull in the first 100, cool, we're good. We pull in the second 100, we have all 100. However, the third network call, say I have 250 followers, the third network call is only gonna be 50 followers. So that means logically that I don't have more followers. Now, of course, there is a situation where I have exactly 400 followers. So in that edge case, you will make another network call, but then it will return 0, which is gonna be less than 100, and then you'll stop. So here we want to check to see if they have less than 100 followers that are returned from this network call. So here in the success case where we get our followers back, before we do anything, we can check to see if there's less than 100 followers. So if followers, you want to make sure it's the local one here, followers dot count is less than 100, then I like to do this on one line, like I said. Then we have to do self because we're in the closure. Self dot has more followers equals false. So again, what we're saying here, like say I get back 86. Well, that means I don't have another page of followers because I only had 86. So now we're flipping our flag to false here. Has more followers equals false. So now if we scroll down again and hit the bottom of our scroll view, like we're doing here, now it's going to hit this, hey, we've hit the bottom of the scroll view, but has more followers is going to be false. So nothing is going to happen. This code won't execute. We're just going to return out of this function. Nothing happens. So this is how we're not just repeatedly, incrementing the page number and making network calls. So now that we have that check taken care of, there's one last thing we have to do, right? If you notice here on line 60, we're just setting our followers array, which again is what we're using, which is this right here that we're using for our collection view. We're just setting that equal to followers. So if you're following along, what you might be noticing is, yeah, we got page 2. Ooh, real quick, I hard coded this. See, ooh, forgot to do that. We want to pass in the page that we pass in here instead of hard coded 1. Glad I caught that because it wouldn't have worked. So yeah, we're passing in the page. So when we increment page to 2 and 3, we're bringing in like the next 100 followers, right? Followers 200 through 299 or whatever it is, follower 300 through 399. So if we just set followers equal to the followers we get back, we're only going to see followers, 201 to 300, whatever it is. We're not going to see those first 100. So arrays have something append contents of, where you can essentially like add arrays together, because that's what we want to do, right? We want to add the next 100 followers to our first 100 followers to create an array of 200 followers, and now use that in our collection view. So to do that here, instead of setting it equal to followers, we need to do dot append, and you can see you can do just one element. Well, we don't want to append just one follower. We want to append a sequence of followers, which is an array. So append contents of, and now is followers. And again, make sure you do the local one because we want to pass in this one. So now what's happening is our followers array is going to have 100 followers. We're going to download the next page and just add that to the list of followers. And then we update data on our collection view, which here using the diffable data source, it applies all that. Remember, we're appending the new array of followers. And I know I just said that might be confusing. We're not like adding followers. Remember, the snapshot takes a snapshot of your old data and a snapshot of your new data. And our new data is full of all our 200 followers, not just the 100. And then it makes the changes. So in theory, after all that, when I run it, we should be able to swipe down and pull in the next 100 followers. We haven't done the loading screen yet. That'll be in a couple videos. So you might not see any like loading bars or anything like that, but you should be able to tell that we're pulling in new followers. Should be keyword. It's always scary, right? When you just typed code for a while and you haven't tested it yet. Usually I'm like constantly testing along the way, but in order to like explain things, sometimes that doesn't always make the most sense. So, okay, let's keep scrolling to the bottom. Scroll. We're at the bottom. Bring in the next one. There we go. You see, it took a little bit. Like in the future, we're going to, have a little loading spinner to let the user know, like, hey, we're loading these in. So now we got the next 200, and then this will be the good test, right? Because we should stop after this. So we hit the bottom. Okay, we brought in the next ones, but this shouldn't be a full 100 unless I got a lot more followers lately. Yeah, so see, remember I said I had like 200 something followers. Now we're not loading in the next 100, right? It's hitting this has more followers flag is going to be false. So it's not loading in the next one. So that is pagination, bringing in, and then now we scroll up, it's a really long collection view now. But remember, because we cached all these images, like all these images are cached now. So as we scroll up and scroll down really, really fast, we're not making network calls. We're just pulling it from the cache. So you're not going to see any loading, any hiccups, super smooth performance because we cached all those images in the previous video. So that's pagination and how we're pulling in the next 100 followers. In the next video, we're going to start dealing with the loading screen that I just talked about, the spinner. It's not as simple as just throwing an activity indicator on there, although we do use an activity indicator. It's actually a whole view. And then also the empty states, right? Because what happens if we type in, let's go back, hopefully my coworker still has no followers. She's the one I've been using, Wendy-Aluna. get followers. Okay, good. Nobody followed her. Don't follow her on this video. You're going to mess up my example. Somebody's going to follow her for sure. But anyway, so see, we have nothing here in this screen. We want that nice empty state that I showed in the design that says, hey, look, this doesn't have any followers, you know, help her out, give her some follows. So we're going to implement that empty state in the next video, as well as the loading screen. So see you then.